Welcome to the Debunkers Podcast, the show where we try to slice through all the noise and really pull out the insights you need on, well, complex topics.
Glad to be diving in.
Today, we're plunging into a subject that honestly sparks incredible debate: homeopathy.
Definitely a controversial one.
We've got a really fascinating stack of sources for you covering, everything from its surprising origins right through to the sharp scrutiny of modern science and even its kind of enduring, often puzzling social dimensions. Our mission today is really just to unpack all of this so you can feel truly well-informed on what's actually going on.
Yeah, it's certainly a deep dive into complexity. We'll navigate the scientific consensus, which is pretty definitive, but also some intriguing, more nuanced findings from recent research that add some very interesting layers, I think.
And here's the hook that really sets the stage, right?
Yeah.
It's straight from our sources. After looking at over 1,800 studies, scientists have largely concluded that homeopathy, well, it doesn't work.
That's the general finding, yes.
Yet, it remains incredibly popular all over the world. So how can both of those things be true at the same time?
It's a paradox, isn't it?
To even begin to answer that, I think we have to go back to the beginning, understand its fundamental ideas.
What exactly is homeopathy? Its origins and core tenets.
Okay, so let's start peeling back those layers. Where did it all begin? Homeopathy was established by a German physician, Samuel Hahnemann. What were his foundational ideas? The real bedrock of it all.
Right. So at its core, homeopathy rests on a few key principles Hahnemann laid down. The first one is the law of similars.
Like cures like, right?
Exactly, often summarized as like cures like. The basic idea is that a substance which causes certain symptoms in a healthy person is believed to cure similar symptoms in someone who is sick.
Okay.
Then you've got potentization, or sometimes called dynamization. This is a pretty unique process. It involves sequential dilution, often to extreme degrees.
Like really extreme.
Oh yeah, and it's combined with vigorous shaking, which is known as succussion.
Succussion.
And we're talking about typically 100 vigorous strokes at each dilution step. Now, this isn't just about mixing things up. The belief behind it is that this physical action actually enhances the remedy's healing power by releasing some kind of spirit-like force. It's based on an old idea called vitalism, which suggests there's a non-physical life force involved in healing.
Ah, vitalism. But wasn't that idea, scientifically challenged even during Hahnemann's own lifetime?
That's a really crucial point, yes. Back in 1828, Friedrich Wöhler, he famously synthesized urea from inorganic stuff.
Right, which shouldn't have been possible according to vitalism.
Exactly. It directly falsified vitalism's core idea that organic compounds could only be made by living things. It showed you didn't need a special spirit-like force.
But Hahnemann didn't accept that.
No. The sources indicate he chose to disregard these emerging scientific findings and stuck with his vitalistic ideas.
Interesting. Okay, what else?
So, linked to potentization is the minimum dose principle. These remedies are diluted so much, often way beyond the point where even a single molecule of the original substance is statistically likely to remain.
Not even one molecule.
Statistically, no.
Wow.
And finally, there's individualization. This means remedies aren't, one size fits all.
It's very personalized.
Very. They're custom tailored to a patient's unique and really comprehensive symptom. Picture everything from physical symptoms, intellectual functions, emotional state, lifestyle, even their likes and dislikes. It's meant to be a very holistic approach.
That sounds incredibly detailed. How do they even build those highly specific symptom pictures in the first place?
Yeah.
The sources mentioned something called a proving process.
Yeah, that's right. Provings. That's where they give the remedies to healthy volunteers. And then they meticulously record every single thing that happens, every manifestation. We're talking idiosyncrasies in their thinking or emotions, subtle physical symptoms, attributes of their excretions, sensitivity to temperature, even details about their daily rhythms and lifestyle.
So they build this massive profile for each remedy.
Exactly. It creates a detailed remedy picture or a repertory, which practitioners then try to match as closely as possible to a specific patient's unique and comprehensive symptoms.
The scientific wall. Why conventional science says homeopathy doesn't work.
Okay, so if that's the foundation, where does the friction with established science really kick in? What are the main points of contention, from a conventional scientific view?
Well, the primary issues really are that homeopathy's core assumptions, they just violate fundamental laws of chemistry and physics.
Like what?
We're talking about things like the law of mass action, which governs chemical reactions, and also the second law of thermodynamics, which deals with energy and entropy.
Right. Basic stuff.
Pretty basic, yeah. Essentially, these laws tell us that you need actual molecules, actual stuff, to have a chemical effect. And also that systems naturally tend towards disorder, towards entropy, not towards holding some kind of special order without energy input.
And the dilutions obviously fly in the face of that.
Absolutely. The most famous example is what's often called the Avogadro's number problem.
Explain that a bit.
Okay, so Avogadro's number is huge. It relates to the number of molecules in a substance. Once you dilute something beyond a certain point, it's roughly a 12C dilution, which is 1 part in 10 to the power of 24.
Which is astronomical.
Astronomical, and becomes statistically impossible for even one single molecule of the original substance to still be in the final solution.
So what you're saying is beyond that point, these remedies are quite literally just the diluent, like water or alcohol.
Scientifically speaking, yes. That's the absolute core challenge homeopathy faces from chemistry and physics.
So how do homeopaths explain that? Is there a counter-argument?
Well, to try and get around this, some modern homeopathic theories invoke the idea of water memory.
Water memory.
Yeah, the suggestion that water somehow remembers the properties of the substance that was diluted in it.
Okay. Does science support that?
Not really, no. The hydrogen bond networks in water, which is what some theories point to for this memory, they rearrange incredibly fast.
How fast?
We're talking femtoseconds to picoseconds. That's like unbelievably fast. 50 femtoseconds, maybe 1.3 picoseconds.
So any memory would be gone almost instantly.
Exactly. And the energy from the shaking, the succussion, it's just trivial compared to the natural thermal energy and the constant rapid movement of water molecules. It simply can't create or maintain any kind of lasting order or information in the water.
Makes sense.
And what's more, there's this other issue, a kind of contaminant illogicality. Many common homeopathic remedies use compounds like calcium carbonate from oyster shells or arsenic compounds,
Right.
which are actually often already present as tiny contaminants in the water, or alcohol used for the dilution process itself.
So the stuff they're adding might already be there anyway, just naturally.
At very low levels, yes. So it becomes illogical to claim that the potentiarization process gives a specific action to the added substance when those very substances might already be present as background impurities in the diluent.
Okay, that adds another layer of difficulty. Now, I've also heard some, pretty out there theories trying to explain how this could possibly work, stuff beyond water memory. Some sources mention things like quantum entanglement.
That does come up sometimes, yes.
But the sources also suggest this kind of serves as an immunization strategy against testing it. How does that work?
Right, so concepts like weak quantum theory or even patient-practitioner remedy entanglement are sometimes proposed. The immunization strategy part is the argument that, well, if these supposed entangled states were actually observed or measured, like in a proper randomized controlled trial.
The gold standard for medical evidence.
Exactly. The argument goes that the act of observation or measurement would cause the entanglement to collapse, and therefore the homeopathic therapeutic effect would be lost or diminished.
So they're basically saying it can't be properly tested by science, or if you do test it, you destroy the very effect you're looking for.
That's the gist of that particular line of argument, yeah. It effectively makes the claim untestable, or at least unfalsifiable, by conventional methods.
Which sounds convenient, maybe, from a scientific perspective.
Well, from the perspective of someone like Karl Popper and his philosophy of science, yes. Homeopathy's theories are often criticized for lacking plausibility, lacking explanatory power. And this kind of argument makes them seem immunized against scrutiny and falsification, as one source put it.
Because you can always say the test failed because the test itself broke the magic.
Sort of. And fundamentally, homeopathy hasn't really contributed anything to our actual understanding of how the human body works, physiology or pathophysiology. It doesn't offer testable predictions in a standard scientific way.
Okay, so what's the bottom line then? When you put all our sources together, these big reviews, what's the overarching scientific consensus?
It's pretty consistent. Multiple high-level government reviews from places like Switzerland, the UK, Australia, the European Academy Science Advisory Council, and also large-scale meta-analyses of studies, they've all concluded there is, and I'm quoting variations here, no reliable evidence or no robust, reproducible evidence that homeopathy is effective beyond a placebo effect.
Beyond placebo. That's the key phrase.
That's the consistent finding. And yeah, many sources are quite blunt, explicitly stating that scientists generally consider it a sham, pseudoscience, or even quackery?
The power of belief. Understanding the placebo effect.
Okay, so if the scientific evidence seems so clear on its actual ineffectiveness, why on earth is homeopathy still so remarkably popular? Our sources point pretty directly to the placebo effect, right?
Absolutely. And it's crucial to understand that the placebo effect isn't just imaginary or all in your head. It's recognized now as a real, genuine psychobiological phenomenon.
Psychobiological.
Yeah, it actively involves the brain, neurotransmitters, and the patient's anticipation of getting better. It's not just one single effect either, but rather a whole complex of placebo effects that come from the entire therapeutic situation.
The context matters.
Massively. This idea of contextual healing is key. Factors like how high the patient's expectations are, the quality of the relationship they have with the practitioner, the treatment environment itself, the sort of rituality of the whole process.
Like the long consultation in homeopathy.
Exactly. That detailed consultation, the feeling of being listened to, the careful selection of a remedy, all that ritualism, and even the broader social context. All these things can significantly boost placebo responses.
So how might this apply specifically to homeopathy then, given its very personalized, often quite ritualistic approach?
Well, the sources suggest that this individualized homeopathy, precisely because of those detailed consultations, the active listening, the meticulous history-taking, and that whole ritualistic process, it might naturally elicit a stronger, maybe more profound placebo response compared to, say, just being handed an inert pill with very minimal interaction.
So the experience itself is potentially therapeutic, regardless of the pill's contents.
That's the idea behind the placebo explanation, yes. The entire encounter contributes to the belief and the anticipation of healing.
Are there specific conditions where placebo effects are known to be particularly strong?
Yes, definitely. Our sources list things like pain, various kinds of pain, irritable bowel syndrome, or IBS, fibromyalgia, and insomnia as prime examples. These are conditions where patients often show quite significant improvement from placebos in clinical trials.
Which brings us to a really fascinating concept that's gaining ground. Open-label placebos, or OLP. We're seeing studies now where they give placebos without deceiving the patient. How does that even work?
Yeah, it sounds counterintuitive, right?
Right.
But it's really interesting in terms of actively harnessing these contextual effects we've been talking about.
How do they do it?
In these studies, they openly give patients a placebo, like a sugar pill, but they frame it with a plausible rationale. They might explain the power of the mind-body connection, how the ritual of taking a pill can trigger self-healing mechanisms, things like that.
And it works.
Surprisingly, yes. Studies have shown potential for real symptom relief in various conditions, things like chronic low back pain, cancer-related fatigue, even migraine attacks using this open-label approach.
Wow.
It really highlights how powerful the context, the ritual, and the patient's understanding and belief can be, maybe just as potent as any perceived active ingredient, even when they know full well it's a placebo they're taking.
Why the persistent popularity?
Yeah.
Sociocultural and economic factors.
Okay, so beyond the placebo effect, which is clearly a big part of the story, there must be something else going on here, right? What other factors contribute to homeopathy's kind of enduring global popularity, despite that scientific consensus?
Yeah, it's not just the placebo. Well, global surveys show that homeopathy is actually pretty popular. Sometimes as popular as things like acupuncture or herbal medicine in various countries.
Really? That popular?
Apparently so. And historically, right from the start, it seems to have been quite popular among the upper classes, royalty, aristocracy.
Oh, like who?
Well, Prince Charles, for instance, is mentioned as a patron of the Faculty of Homeopathy in the UK. And interestingly, Hahnemann himself, the founder, apparently died a millionaire in Paris. So it had appeal and perhaps financial success, even back then.
What about today? Who tends to use it now?
Well, there was a Swiss survey mentioned. And remember, in Switzerland, homeopathy is actually covered by their public healthcare system.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and that survey found that typical users there are often young, female, relatively affluent, and tend to have higher levels of education.
Wait, higher education? That seems counterintuitive, maybe. Why would a demographic that's typically highly educated embrace something with such, well, conflicting scientific evidence? That is genuinely puzzling.
It is puzzling, and our sources actually dig into this a bit. They bring up Charles Percy Snow's famous observation about the two cultures.
The science versus humanities divide.
Exactly. Snow noted that many highly educated Westerners might be incredibly knowledgeable in arts, literature, humanities, but sometimes surprisingly scientifically illiterate. Like they might struggle to explain something really fundamental, say the second law of thermodynamics.
Okay.
So the sources suggest that maybe this socially acceptable scientific illiteracy, perhaps combined with a bit of overconfidence in one's own judgment, could help explain why some high social rank, educated individuals might champion homeopathy.
So the argument isn't about a lack of intelligence, but maybe about what kind of knowledge or evidence they prioritize or feel comfortable with.
That seems to be the implication. It's not about being unintelligent, but perhaps valuing different forms of knowing or explanation.
Are there other psychological factors?
Yes, some studies mentioned show that beliefs in complementary and alternative medicine, including homeopathy, tend to correlate positively with things like ontological confusions.
Which means?
Basically kind of mixed up ideas about reality, what's physical, what's mental, what causes what, and also with illusory pattern perception. Seeing meaningful patterns in random noise.
Seeing connections that aren't really there.
Right. And conversely, these beliefs tend to correlate negatively with a more analytical thinking style. So you could see it as reflecting perhaps a worldview where strict scientific evidence is maybe valued a bit less, and perhaps more emotional, intuitive, or spiritual explanations are preferred.
That makes a certain kind of sense. And what about the interaction with mainstream medicine? Does that play a role?
It definitely seems to. The sources highlight that dissatisfaction and, frankly, distrust of mainstream medicine can definitely increase if physicians treat patients who are exploring alternative options in a dismissive or coercive way, as one source put it.
So being told, that's nonsense, don't do it, might actually push people away.
It might, whereas being willing to actually engage, listen, understand the patient's needs and beliefs, and support them even if you don't agree with a therapy that can foster a much better relationship and potentially ease reconciliation between the patient and conventional medicine.
Safety, regulation, and economics, the practical side of homeopathy.
Okay, so let's bring this down to, brass tacks. What about practical issues? Are there safety concerns with homeopathic remedies themselves? And how is this stuff actually managed and regulated out in the real world?
Right, safety. Well, while most remedies are, by definition, incredibly diluted, some homeopathic preparations do start with substances that are known poisons. Things like belladonna, arsenic, poison ivy are used.
Seriously, arsenic?
Yes, as starting materials. Now, in theory, they're diluted to oblivion. But the concern is, in rare cases, maybe due to improper preparation or even intentional low dilution, the original toxic ingredients can still be present at detectable and potentially harmful levels.
Has that actually happened?
Yes, there have been reports of serious adverse effects, including seizures and tragically even deaths. A key example mentioned is the US FDA issuing a safety alert back in 2016 about homeopathic teething gels.
Teething gels. For babies.
Exactly. And this followed an earlier investigation in 2010, which found that some of these products contained unsafe levels of belladonna because they hadn't been diluted properly.
Wow. Okay, so safety isn't a complete non-issue then? What about regulation?
Well, scientific bodies consistently recommend that all medical products, regardless of origin, should meet the same requirements. They should have to demonstrate efficacy, safety, and quality based on solid, verifiable evidence.
Makes sense. Treat everything the same.
Right. They also generally suggest that public health systems shouldn't pay for homeopathic products unless they've been rigorously proven effective and safe through scientific trials.
And labeling.
Yeah, clear labeling of ingredients and the actual amount or lack thereof and accurate advertising are also strongly recommended. And as we touched on, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, has signaled it intends to exercise closer scrutiny over homeopathic drugs moving forward.
What about the economics? You mentioned it's covered by public health insurance in some places, like Switzerland.
That's right, which surprises many people. However, some sources actually suggest that maybe to save healthcare resources, patients should perhaps pay for homeopathic remedies themselves.
Out of pocket.
Yeah. And interestingly, they also mentioned that paying for it might even enhance the placebo response.
How so?
Well, there's some evidence that things we perceive as more valuable or costly can sometimes elicit a stronger placebo effect. So, paradoxically, making it free or cheap might actually reduce the placebo benefit.
Oh, that's counterintuitive again.
It is. There's also a suggestion in some sources that maybe these remedies should be prescription only.
Why?
The main reason given is to prevent people from self-administering them for serious conditions that actually do have effective conventional treatments, potentially delaying or replacing necessary medical care, which could obviously be dangerous.
That makes sense. Are there professional standards within homeopathy itself?
Yes, definitely. It's worth noting that professional bodies, like the Alliance of Registered Homeopaths, ARH, mentioned in one source, do have their own codes of ethics and practice.
What do those cover?
Things you'd expect: emphasizing patient needs, confidentiality, ensuring informed choice, professional competence, and they apparently have detailed complaint procedures too, including things like mediation and formal hearings if issues arise. So there are internal professional frameworks.
A new nuance. The gynecological meta-analysis.
Okay, now let's pivot slightly, because you shared some very recent research that adds a really interesting, maybe unexpected wrinkle to this whole discussion.
Yes, the 2024 meta-analysis.
Right, from the Medical University of Vienna, published just this year, and it focused specifically on homeopathic trials in gynecology. What did that find? It sounded potentially significant.
It did catch attention. So this meta-analysis looked at 19 controlled clinical trials in gynecology involving over 1,500 patients in total. And its main finding was a significant result in favor of homeopathic treatments. But, and this is a really crucial but, only in a very specific subgroup of trials. These were the placebo-controlled trials that the reviewers assessed as having a low risk of bias.
Okay, low risk of bias, that sounds good. But it sounds like it might contradict the broader consensus we just discussed. How do we square that?
It's definitely a finding that needs careful interpretation. And it's crucial to look at the study's own caveats, which they were quite clear about.
Okay, what were they?
Well, first, the meta-analysis itself noted there was a high degree of heterogeneity across all the subgroups they looked at.
Meaning the results were kind of all over the place.
Pretty much, yeah. The outcomes varied substantially between the different studies, even within subgroups. Second, they specifically highlighted distinctive and severe challenges to design, implementation, and reporting in the actual homeopathic trials they included.
So the underlying studies weren't perfect?
Far from it, apparently. They mentioned specifically that the descriptions of how patients were recruited, how blinding was done, the randomization procedures they often missed, crucial information, needed to properly assess their quality.
Okay, that's important context.
Very important. And another critical point, they found no studies that compared homeopathy to active controls, meaning standard conventional medical treatments that also met their criteria for having a low risk of bias.
So they only found this positive result when comparing homeopathy against a placebo in the few studies deemed low bias, not against actual medicine.
Precisely. So while that specific subgroup finding is interesting, the study authors themselves conclude that, essentially, further research of high methodological quality and the investigation of larger patient pools are absolutely necessary before you could draw any solid conclusions about effectiveness.
So it's really more of a pointer towards needing better research rather than a definitive answer saying it works for this.
Exactly. It's not a clear yes or no even here. It really just highlights the complexities of actually researching homeopathy properly and the persistent need for much higher quality studies in this field. The plot, as they say, thickens, even on the research front.
Wow, okay. That really was a deep dive. We've navigated the intricate history of homeopathy, its really profound challenges to scientific understanding, the undeniable power of that placebo effect.
Which is very real.
Absolutely. And the curious reasons behind its persistent popularity, and now even taking a nuanced look at some very recent research. It's a lot.
It is a lot. And I think it's clear that while the scientific community, by and large, finds homeopathy ineffective beyond placebo, its enduring use clearly highlights something more than just people searching for a magic cure.
Yeah, it feels like it speaks to deeper human needs within healthcare, doesn't it?
I think so.
Exactly. So maybe the question to leave everyone with is this. What does the persistent global popularity of homeopathy, despite that strong scientific consensus against it, truly reveal about us? About, the human need for healing narratives, the real desire for personalization in healthcare, and maybe even the limits of purely scientific explanations when it comes to addressing human suffering.
That's a big question.
It is, and maybe a related one. How might mainstream medicine adapt? How can it more effectively incorporate those powerful, non-specific therapeutic factors we talked about, like the placebo effect, like the crucial patient-provider relationship, without actually compromising its own scientific integrity?
Finding that balance is key.
Definitely something to ponder. It seems our time for today is wrapping up.
We really appreciate you joining us for this deep dive.
It's always great having your input and thoughts. Thank you so much for listening and for being such an engaged part of our podcast.
We always value your participation.
Until our next deep dive together.
Goodbye for now, and we'll see you next time.